right, we're back with the second part of cleanse, and L stands for less. So here are some of the basics that I learned when I was studying to be a respiratory therapist. And these will be all the same bit of normals that would be quoted in any research as well. The normal respiratory rate is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. The average intake of air on an inhalation is half of a liter. And for those on the high end of that range, that's probably more about 2 times what the amount was that our ancestors would have been breathing. So we are a culture of overbreathers. Not only are we a culture of overeaters, we're also a culture of overbreathers. Yay, us. So about 25% of us are probably chronic overbreathers. And we're just really conditioned to breathe too much, just as we've been conditioned to eat too much. So let's kind of get into this a little bit. So breathing less isn't the same as breathing slowly. Alarm going off. It's my interruption to tell me that I'm supposed to just check in, make sure that I'm doing okay if I need to take a little break. But we're good, so we're going to keep going. All right, so like I was saying, so breathing less isn't the same as breathing slowly. So our adult lungs can only physically hold 4 to 6 liters. Unless you're doing some other work to make them bigger than that, then that's a whole other different story. So if you do, I've got some math over here. So 12 to 20 is our normal breaths per minute, and we take in half a liter for each breath. So if you're breathing at 12 breaths per minute, so the very low end of that, taking in that half liter, you're taking in 6 liters per minute. So right at the max, basically, of what a normal set of lungs is like. So it's capable of. If you're at the high end, this is what I was saying, it's almost 2 times. 20 breaths per minute at half a liter is 10 liters in a minute. It's massive. So we need to just pull it back. The magic number is 5.5. And I know it sounds really, really low, but we're going to get into why that's the number. So some of the things that'll happen when you can start breathing less is a decrease in blood pressure. And we all know why that may or may not be a good thing for some of us. An increase in heart rate variability. And I'm going to come back and explain what that is what that's all about in just a second. And an increase in energy. So the key to optimizing all those benefits is that the fewer inhales and fewer exhales and smaller volumes. So it's not just breathing slowly. It's just breathing in less, breathing out less, and just moving less air. So let's come back to one of those benefits we just talked about in there, because I think the blood pressure and energy is self-explanatory, but heart rate variability might be to you. So what it is, I'm just going to read the definition. It's a measure of the variation in time between each heart. So you might have a heart rate of 60 beats per minute. It's not an equal amount of time necessarily between in each of those heartbeats. So, and that variation is controlled by something called our autonomic nervous system. So it's something that you don't have any control over. Whereas you can affect your heart rate pretty easily just by, you know how you do it. Jump up and down, breathe hard, whatever, slow your breathing down. You can affect your heart rate pretty quickly. You can't affect this one. So why it's a really, really good indicator of the health of your nervous system. And that's something I think you're going to start hearing a lot about this, the health of your nervous system. Something I'm kind of really diving into myself. And it's really, honestly, it's the heart of what this module, this Reinvent Your Breath is all about, is getting into regulating your nervous system. And this is one of the things where it's going to show up. So if your nervous system is in that constant state of fight or flight, stressed out, you've got all those stress hormones circulating, you have decreased variability between your heart individual beats. When your nervous system is relaxed, you have more variability between the heartbeats. And why this is important is that ability to have more variation makes it easier for you to switch gears. So you've got more resilience. When it's pretty fixed, you don't have a lot of ability to respond. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's come back over as I follow my notes. So think about breathing less, kind of like the respiratory equivalent of fasting. So we probably heard lots of things about why some people think fasting is a really good thing. And this is kind of the same thing. So we should try to breathe as closely in line with what our needs are as possible. So again, having that ability to have variation. So when you're working hard, you take all the air you need to get, but when you're resting, it doesn't have to be quite that same amount of energy expenditure. So there are really potent benefits to fasting in the endurance world, things around endurance and well-being. It can be challenging. It's the same in the respiratory world. We're going to talk about respiratory fasting. Yes, before we even get into the details, so just know, like, anytime you're doing focused breathing work, whatever it is, it's going to be uncomfortable, most likely, unless you're specifically trying to do things that are geared towards relaxing you. I just find anytime you are consciously paying attention to your breathing, it can get uncomfortable. So just try to relax, try to go with it. Some things like this are designed to make you uncomfortable, just like a workout is designed to make you uncomfortable so that you're better later when you're resting. This is the same kind of premise. So let's get into that. So how you would start incorporating this breathing less into your life is you really want to start by extending your exhales. So normally, when a person is at rest, you tend to breathe in for about 3 seconds and breathe out for about 4 seconds. So you don't want to worry too much about changing your inhalation. Just let your body do what it's going to do. You want to just start by thinking about increasing your exhalation. So start by increasing it by 1 second. So take it out to 5 seconds. So you're breathing in for 3 and out for 5. For 3, out for 5. You get comfortable with that, take it to 6, then take it to 7, then keep going. So this is why it's going to get uncomfortable. So as you start moving less air, your carbon dioxide levels are going to increase. And this is something that helps us increase our aerobic endurance. So you'll see this kind of stuff coming up. Maybe if you've been watching the Olympics, you might have been hearing about some of this stuff because it's pretty common, it can be quite popular in the running and swimming world. I don't know if it is right now, but it tends to be one of these things that cycles in and out of fad, I guess. So as you're doing this, you start to be able to increase the amount of oxygen that you consume, which helps increase your stamina, your longevity. And where this gets linked into health is a lot of things like heart disease, ulcers, chronic inflammation. All of these things are linked to disturbances in our circulation and our blood pH. And we're going to circle back on that a little bit more just to talk about why that's important. So it's just, for now, I just want you to think about this in terms of how we breathe affects these things. It's not, we think of it as this very passive process. We're going to do it as long as our nervous system is intact. We're going to breathe without any effort, any conscious effort. But we can affect our health when you start taking some intent into this. So it only takes about 10 to 20% more air intake to really overwhelm your body. So think about going back to those numbers that we are already at the low end of that 12 to 20 normal rate, already kind of maxing out. And a lot of people are breathing at a much higher rate than 12, I can guarantee that. So and this is one of those things that you practice. So as your body starts to get comfortable with those increased levels of CO2, you will start to unconsciously breathe less while you're resting. It's just one of those things. So you're going to be uncomfortable while you do it. Like I said, it's just like a workout. You're uncomfortable while you're doing it to get the benefits while you're resting as well. And it's just going to start releasing more oxygen into your system. You might feel like you just got a little more gas in the tank, a little more regular access to it. And it just gives better support to all the functions in your body. And that's going to, again, come back to the pH. And we're going to circle back to that. So other things you might hear this called, called hypoventilation training. So, sorry, hyperventilation training. So I'm sorry, I'm getting that backwards. Hyper means over, so more than normal. Hypoventilation is being less than what is normal. So again, like I said before, it kind of rises in and out of popularity in the athletic world. And they're doing it under the premise that you're increasing the number of red blood cells in your blood, which then can carry more oxygen, and just training your body to do more with less, making it more efficient. And the other thing where I first came into this is that it can be really beneficial to people with certain respiratory diseases. So let's go there for a second. So this is where my first exposure to it was in my respiratory therapy days, and particularly around the asthma world, and even some in the COPD world as well. So let's just talk a little bit about asthma. So asthma is a global epidemic. Throw some numbers at it. 25 million people in the US. That's about 8% of the population would say that they have asthma, and that's a 4 times increase since the 1980s. And there are tons and tons and tons of costs related to this. So hospitalizations, medications, lost work, school, and I'm just trying to figure where I want to go with this. So what happens kind of with asthma is that you kind of can end up with an immune sensitivity that creates muscle spasms in the airways. And it can be also brought on by overbreathing. That's the link where we're going with that. So, and you'll hear about it with exercise-induced asthma, and that's a big chunk of the asthmatic population in the world. It can be like 15 to 40%. So it's a big piece. So what happens with asthma is air gets trapped in the lungs. It's funny. It feels like you can't get breath in when you're having an asthmatic attack, but it's actually the air is getting trapped inside your lungs. And it's a big dollar industry, $20 billion a year. And there's significant side effects from the medications as well. So this whole breathing less concept is really effective for respiratory issues like this. And it just helps that feeling of not being able to move enough air, and it takes a lot of practice. Let's circle back to this whole pH piece. So overbreathing, excuse me, affects the pH of your blood by lowering the carbon dioxide or the CO2, so making it more alkaline. So cellular activities happen when your pH is neutral or at 7.4. And that's the function of everything in our body is happening at the cellular level. So when there are changes in the pH, your body can compensate for that in the short term. Your kidneys will release some bicarbonate. It disrupts the balance over the long term, though, and can lead to things with nerve degeneration and muscle spasms, and then it impacts your breathing even more, because now your body's compensating already, and now you have to breathe differently to affect it. Other things that can happen, it also weakens your bones because you start dissolving some of your mineral stores into the bloodstream. And it just leads to a stressed, inflamed, congested environment inside our body. And that is not what we want. And it can really become a struggle to move air in and out. So just to wrap this whole section up, less breathing. So less inhales, less exhales, less volume is going to lead to improved breathing efficiencies. Decrease your heart rate at rest, which is a massive indicator health. So that optimum number, so think 5.5 liters. We're just going to kind of split that difference on that 4 to 6 liters for our normal lungs. 5.5 liters, 5.5 breaths per minute. It's not easy to get there. I struggle too. I don't do it. It doesn't come very naturally for me either. One of the things, you just got to work on it. So less. All right. that is our first two done. We're going to move on to our next one, which is exhale. See you over there. Bye.